Hello and welcome to the Womb Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Sama Morningstar and I have Dianna Beaulieu with me here. Thank you for joining us, Dianna. I invited Dianna to come on here as a guest because she's been a member of the Womb Centered Healing Temple Facebook group and has been sharing about her womb centered healing journey and some of the teachings that have come out of that. And so I wanted to learn more when you were sharing about that. So I invited Dianna to join us on the podcast. So would you please introduce yourself a little bit more, Dianna, and share with us about your womb centered healing journey?
Thank you, Sandra. I would love to. It's an honor to be on your show. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm very much a woman who had no idea she had a womb for a very long time. And even after having had a child, I still had no idea I had a womb. I was on a really quite profound healing journey, or so I thought, for many years, until I really discovered the power of the womb. So what I do now is I teach all about womb awakening and healing the womb. But for a long time, I was on a very let's say deep but gradual journey to kind of move down from my head gradually into my body. And I began life as an academic, so I was completely in my head. And it was actually quite a profound relationship crisis that led me to realize just how much unhappiness there was in my body, how much despair, how much depression I actually felt in myself, how much self-hatred. And I took myself on a journey through shamanic body work and through Chinese medicine, really to start releasing a lot of the pain and suffering out of my body that I hadn't acknowledged was there. However, it wasn't until my daughter was about 7 years old, and I'd been on a shamanic path for several years, working with the drum, working with healing, working with body work. I'd been on that path maybe for about 15 years at this point, when my womb really woke up. And it was clearly for me a sign that I was ready to encounter what she was holding. And so when my womb really woke up, I discovered that I'd been sexually abused as a child. And the womb really spilled out her memories of that, memories that had been completely suppressed for 40 years. And so I spent about 3 years on and off lying in bed shaking. And literally it was my womb shaking and releasing out memory and pain and emotion and physical pain and fear. And all of these things that had become lodged in my womb and my hips and my pelvis as a result of sexual abuse experiences when I was a very young child. And so for me, that was an incredibly difficult but empowering experience, because it explained to me so much why I'd begun my journey in my head, why I'd sought refuge so young in this kind of upper part of my body, in my intellect. And it explained to me also why, when I'd started moving into my body, why I'd found so much pain and suffering that I couldn't explain actually on a logical basis. Mm-hmm. And so my story began to complete and knit together as I moved into the acknowledgement and the re-experiencing and releasing of my traumatic memories. What happened at the same time, however, was that I began to receive very clear messages at a spiritual level that my work was also evolving, and I was being called to actually share this experience and this journey with other women. Not my own personal journey, but to actually find the fruits and the jewels of what I was experiencing, to help other women really find the strength, power, and courage to tap into their own wombs and all of the pain and power and passion that is inside our wombs. And so within a few months of my first memories, I started running circles for women, and I had no idea what would happen. I just get the message that women are going to arrive and you're going to know what to say to them. You're going to know what to teach them. And so my first ever Womb Awakening course, I had no idea what was going to happen. I just knew that I had to invite women. So a group of women came and my womb began to speak, and she began to speak of so much deep wisdom in the womb, and such an earth connection, such a galactic connection, such an ancestral connection. And then slowly, little by little, by sitting in circle with women in my TP month after month, I began developing this body of work, which was literally, it would just be downloaded when I was in the presence of other women. And as I began to share the practices that were coming through me, I realized how much women needed this work, how much they needed to recognize their own pain in the womb, but also from releasing that pain, how much they needed to put a new and very focused awareness and attention on their womb as a center of great value, as a place where we set clear sacred boundaries, as a place where we honor ourselves as women. And since I started this journey a few years ago, I've seen so many women come through this process and come through the other end completely transformed, particularly in their relationships and in their relationships to their ancestral line, and in their sense of power and self-worth, and in their sense of being able to set a clear boundary in life, because they have this fierce fire running through them, and a fierce sense of, I honor myself and I am divine, and that feeling comes through my womb. What I also saw was that a lot of people in my life who were very heart connected, who came into working with me in a very heart connected way, but who still hadn't tapped into the power of their womb, really needed to go on that journey. When their spiritual life was in their heart, it was a really good beginning for them, but they weren't grounded in the earth. They weren't grounded in their personal power. They weren't connected to the earth herself. And so I've also seen myself and a lot of other people really take this incredible, immense journey to really arrive in a fully empowered way on the Mother Earth herself, to become powerful women who are doing what's needed. So just a few years ago, you know, my work was literally me sitting in very small groups in a teepee, and now it's global, now it's online, and I'm just coming to the end of an international practitioner training course. Mm-hmm. I don't know how that happened. I'll be really honest, it was a very intense journey. There was this constant interleaving between me and my own healing, which was very, very intense and exhausting at times, and all of this inspiration coming in around what I needed to teach. And so it's been a real roller coaster of a ride. And I feel at the moment that I'm still integrating all of that. I'm still taking time for stillness so that I can actually feel it fully in my body. Feel the power of my womb in my body, feel my connection to the earth, feel the stillness of who I am. Because actually the journey of creating this body of work has been so, so raw and visceral for me.
Wow.
So that's kind of in a nutshell. My journey.
That's quite a nutshell. And I just want to go back to a few moments in the story that you shared to sort of ask a few more bits of information about it and what was going on, because I'm imagining that in order for you to be able to start channeling this powerful body of work through your healing process, your personal healing process, I'm imagining that you had a lot of preparatory work that you did. You said you'd been working with shamanic healing for, you know, a number of years before you started to connect with the womb. And I'm also imagining that you had some support to go through that process of remembering your abuse as a child and processing that and working with that healing. And I'm curious about that, if how the shamanic healing supported you to get to that moment of remembering, and what kind of support you then either had already in place or began to enlist for yourself to go through that process.
Yeah, those are great questions. Thank you, Summer. Thank you for inviting me to expand on those pieces of the nutshell.
Yes.
And so I spent about 10 years working quite intensively with energetic body work, shiatsu, and Chinese medicine. So my first foundation stone was with intuitive energy body work. And that was a very, very important foundation stone for me, because it basically just got me into my body and made me able to deal with energetic and emotional shifts in my body. I then spent around another 7 years doing core shamanic work. So what happened was that after these 10 years in intuitive energy body work, I realized I still had a lot of pieces missing in the way that I was working with myself. And when I discovered working with the drum, working with the shamanic drum, going into journeys, going into my ancestral cave, meeting my guides, doing powerful soul retrieval, ancestral healing inside the cave with my guides, this became my home, my spiritual home, and my foundation stone. And it was after several years of deepening my experience of my shamanic family, as it were, my animal guides, my ancestral guides, my spirit guides, working with them in a very grounded way, always working in a way that I was looking for the evidence that this was true and real. This wasn't a kind of airy-fairy spiritual path. I was looking for deep healing and deep information that was useful to me, that was transforming me. So
can
my
I ask a question?
Yeah.
I would like to ask a question about that. How did you know if something was true and real, as opposed to being an airy-fairy, ungrounded experience?
So in terms of my shamanic experiences, for me, shamanic energy work goes straight into the body. So when that is happening, and when that has happened, you actually feel different in your body. Something has shifted inside you. And for me, that's kind of the mark of when something is real for me. Mm-hmm. If I feel a shift in my body, and if I feel a deep shift in my emotions, whether it's a clearing or a transformation. Mm-hmm. And another mark of truth for me also, in my experience with my guides, has also been talking with them for years and years and years, and starting to trust them because what they say turns out to be true, right?
Can you give an example of something that your guides have shared with you that turns out to be true, that helped you build that trust in the experience?
Yeah, so when I first came to Spain for the first time, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I just had a baby. And I turned to my guides and I said, what am I here to do with my life? Because I genuinely had no idea. I knew that I'd come to a big ending in my life and I needed to start again. And they said to me, you're meant to do shamanic work. That's what you're here to do, and we'll teach you. And so I would literally have clients walking in the door, and I would journey with my guides, and they would tell me what to do. They would give me techniques. And it was later that I read books about shamanic healing, ancient shamanic healing techniques from different parts of the world, and they were identical to the things I'd taught. And that really impacted me. Impacted me.
Yeah,
the information coming through was identical to information that has been shared with shamans from Australia, from South America, from Africa. And so that to me was a very clear mark.
So it sounds like you didn't necessarily have a shamanic teacher that was teaching you these techniques. How did you first start? Did you go to a drum making workshop, or, how did you get your drum? How did you know to start drumming? Did you have a vision?
I was taught by a practitioner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And did you work with that practitioner for a period of time, or?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And then I ended up moving country. So I ended up on my own. And so then it was quite surprising to me that quite quickly I was kind of on my own on the path, as it were.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So you did have some foundational practices that you learned from that practitioner with the drum and the basics of doing shamanic journeying for a period of time. And then boom, you're on your own, and you'd already connected with your guides, and they said, all right, this is what you're going to do, and this is how you're going to do it. And we're your teachers. Now we're going to teach you how to do this.
Exactly.
Okay, beautiful. And so then after all of that preparation and your guides guiding you, and all this energy work and this awareness of how it needs to feel real in the body, and perhaps in things happening in your life, like, for example, your guides telling you this is the work you're meant to do, and then clients showing up and knowing how to serve them, and then perhaps having them feel the realness of it, I'm imagining, and coming back and telling you, wow, this changed in my body, this changed in my emotions, this changed in my life, perhaps. And I'm curious about that aspect too, because for me, one sign of something like that being real is when suddenly things are changing in my life, relationship patterns are changing. Suddenly I have a new capacity to navigate what might have been difficult situations in the past. Now I have new resources, internal resources, and people respond differently. And so it starts to ripple out just from my body to actual changes happening in my life. And so I'm imagining that you, upon having these clients arrive and report back to you that they're having similar changes, that was also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like that would be the natural progression to really give you the feeling that, oh my gosh, yes, my guide said that, and there it is, there it's happening.
Yeah, of course, that was happening repeatedly, and that was how my practice grew, because people were having very positive shifts in their lives and telling their friends, and it was very organic. You know, everything grew very organically because it was real for me and others. Exactly.
Right. And so then you were prepared to, I mean, what happened that made you start to be aware that your womb was the next place to explore?
I don't actually know what triggered me to start having the memories. I can't pinpoint exactly what it was, but all I can say is I believe it's when I was ready. As you say, it was a long preparation to get to the point of having the tools and resources, the inner tools and resources, to be able to really, really harness and release those memories. And you also asked about the support I had around me. Well, I had a lot of support. Mm-hmm. I gathered a lot of support on all sorts of different levels. So I had a very, very intuitive coach helping me to deal with the memories, to get clear on those, to be able to piece things together about my own family history. I did a lot of body work. So I had chiropractic work. I had, and I still have, a lot of massage work, trauma massage work, which is designed to get deep trauma out of the body at a very facial level. I had craniosacral. I have friends who do somatic experiencing. I had my guides. I had women's circles. So I was constantly bathing myself in support. And that was very, very necessary for me.
I'm so glad you are
necessary for everyone.
Yes, that's why I'm glad you're articulating that. That's why I'm asking the question, because you know, as we do this work and make it available, and women and people really of any gender come forward and want to receive it, it's so important to hear how much support and preparation and how wise the womb is to only reveal what we're ready for, and to give us just what we're ready for. And so it's really lovely to hear how that all evolved for you, that it came up and was so strong because you were surrounded by support. And I imagine, I mean, you said that you were shaking in bed for 3 years. I imagine you got out of bed sometimes, but you must have had a certain level of practical and logistical support in your life for those 3 years that allowed.
So I wasn't in bed for 3 years, but I had a period of 3 years where every couple of days or every couple of weeks I'd just go to bed and I'd shake and I'd have more memories, or I'd go over. So I was also a mother and running a business and running a home.
And at the same time. Thanks for clarifying that, because I'm imagining, gosh, she really had a lot of support if she just got to
Yeah.
bed for 3 years.
No.
No.
But no, it's more to say that for about 3 years, that was the principal way in which all of this stuff came out of my body. And I would have days at a time or a weekend at a time, you know, and then I'd have some days where I was fine, but I was tired.
Right.
You know, it was tiring to come in and out of that, space. And it took time to normalize.
And I think that's probably encouraging for people to hear too, who are engaged, and for me personally, who are engaged with this process and might be wondering if, am I just going to be this tired for the rest of my life? You know, what's going on here? Why am I so exhausted? Because it is, you know, our womb, I feel, and part of my body of work and the insight and the guidance that I'm getting is that our wombs are a source of life generative energy, and that we have forgotten how and been disconnected from that source, and that this process of healing that many of us are going through, for me it's very much around my ancestry and my early childhood trauma, that's clearing out the turbulence or the limitations on that life generative power of the womb. I mean, when my womb first spoke to me, it said, I can give you all the energy that you need. Okay, well, you know, and this is when I was having a period of health challenge where I was feeling like I didn't have the energy just to do the basic things I needed to do in life to make a living and to, you know, take care of things in my life. And I was really struggling with that. And my womb said, guess what? You have this source inside of you. And so, but then there's this process that can take how long it takes of, and that the womb sort of is in wise care of, taking care of this process of having it go at a pace just like a pregnancy that takes as long as it takes and is born when it, you know, the baby's born when it's ready. And there's not a timing that we get to decide necessarily logically about that. And for each person, it's going to be different, you know. So for you had this process that went over the course of about 3 years. For someone else, it could be very different depending on what is going on for them and what kind of support they have in their life and what the process is that they're learning how to do. And so it's beautiful that you describe that so clearly. So I appreciate that. And so then at the same time, it sounds like, and this has been my experience too, as soon as you were starting to clear out some of the residue and the trauma and the memories that had been stored there that were taking up space perhaps in your womb and your pelvis, as soon as a bit was cleared out, then that energy of creativity and wisdom and gift to the world had space to come through, little pieces of it at a time, I'm imagining. Just as you would clear out one piece of old residue, then that a new piece of inspiration could come through. Could you describe that process a little bit more?
Yes, indeed. What it felt like was that as the body of work, Sacred Womb Awakening, which is what I call this body of work that came through me, and which I'm sure is very similar to a lot of other womb work. I mean, I think it all has a lot in common. It felt more like a remembering process. It felt like, oh, this is what we did back in the old days. This is what we did in Egypt and in Avalon and, you know, and all these other places. It felt like I was in almost like receiving deeper layers of memory. So I had my lifetime memories of trauma, which were being released, but the gift then was really, really thousands and thousands of years ago kind of memories of, this is what priestesses did. This is how they related to the womb. This was the magic that they did in the womb. And it felt like very, very natural. So as it was coming in, it was just like, oh yeah, of course. You know, there was nothing special about it. It doesn't feel like there was anything special or mystical or different about it. It just felt, yes, this is, of course, this is what we do with our wombs. Mm-hmm. And it just felt very, very natural and very real and always very embodied. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I was kind of receiving a lot of light into my womb, and I feel my womb throbbing with that light. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, I would feel my womb releasing layers of old memories, and I just feel it coming out. Mm-hmm. And it just felt so natural to do that. Mm-hmm. And it felt so natural when the womb songs came out and the prayers came out and the ceremonies came through. Mm-hmm. It was just a deep reconnection and remembering of what it is to be, I suppose, a womb priestess, or whatever we might have called ourselves back when we could do this.
Right. And I'm imagining that that you could probably articulate how that process related to your menstrual cycle and what you learned about that as you went along. I'd love to hear you share about that.
Well, actually, I don't teach a lot about the menstrual cycle. That's one of the things I don't teach about in a huge way, and I'll tell you why. Because I, in my work, I tend to focus a lot on what it is to release our own story through the womb. So we do so much work on disentangling toxic relationships and releasing masculine imprints and clearing our ancestral line, that I actually focus more on almost like our entire soul cycle, our life cycle, our entire life.
Oh, right. Okay.
And although with my practitioners, we talk about the archetypes of the menstrual cycle and living through your cycle, it's not something that I actually teach as part of my body of work. It's of course important, it's vital to connect with your menstrual cycle. And I try and really observe those cycles myself, and the way I use my moon blood. You know, I always put my moon blood on the earth. I've got particular flowers that receive the blood, and there's a blessing. And, you know, so I have my own rituals with my moon blood and with how I use the different stages of the menstrual cycle. But I'm very aware that I think I draw on other people's teachings to relate to that. And for me personally, I didn't have a strong download around the menstrual cycle itself, not to this point. Perhaps at another point I will.
Well, it just sounded like some of the work that you were doing, that some of the work that the menstrual cycle would interplay with that.
Okay.
And that there would be certain times in the menstrual cycle to do certain parts of the process that correspond with and fortify, and there would be other parts of the process that help with trouble with the menstrual cycle, for example, that there would be an interplay that you have discovered in working with your body of work and how it relates to what you've learned about the menstrual cycle.
Well, what I will say is that I've noticed that women's menstrual cycles and myself and my menstrual cycle have been incredibly shifted by this work. Mm-hmm. So examples, I've had periods where I was releasing very, very dark toxicity from my womb, and my moon blood came out black at times. It literally came out looking like treacle. Mm-hmm. I've had other women who have thought they were post-menopausal and their periods have started again after doing a 3-day workshop with me, because their womb has woken up and said, I'm not menopausal. You know, I just didn't have enough energy and attention to keep menstruating.
Right. So for those of us who don't know what treacle is, don't we call that molasses?
Right. Okay. Maybe in the US it's molasses. Yeah. So I've had that, and I've had women I've trained, noticing that after they did a very, very strong healing session, their period would come early, or it would be more heavy, or it would be more challenging, because the womb was just ready to go. She was ready to release whatever that was.
Right. So it sounds like the menstrual cycle can be an active participant. Of course, it would be an active participant in this womb-centered healing process. Yes. And it sounds to me like that having a conscious awareness of that and tracking that, and perhaps doing some planning around that. Of course, if you're doing a workshop with with a group of women coming from different areas of the world, you're not necessarily going to try and get everyone in sync ahead of time to be at the right part of their phase of their menstrual cycle in order to do this process at that time. So it becomes a little bit more impractical. But my imaginings and my insights about that are that in ancient times, when we were womb priestesses, we would be menstruating at the same time, and there would be times when we would do certain parts of, certain processes as priestesses, and certain ceremonies would be done, and we would all be on the same cycle. And that, but in this global space where that might not always happen that way, but our wombs seem to accommodate and say, oh, we're doing this, well, this is what's needed, we're going to bleed now, or whatever adjustment to the cycle. So that's good to hear and to share with people who suddenly have a surprising change or shift. And I know I have with that, and also have averted early menopause, like you talked about, where I started having menopausal symptoms 5 or 6 years ago, and really listened to the inner voice that was screaming for a change in my life. And I said, all right, I can either take this to a therapist who's going to, tell me that change is, that I don't need to make that change, that I just need to do therapy with them for 3 years, or I could say, I'm going to listen to my inner voice and make the change in my life that it was asking me to do. No more early menopause, no more.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Yeah. And so that's just to bring that to the forefront, that we can listen to our wombs, and that our wombs are then responding and participating in that healing process in powerful ways, so that we're not surprised.
I think the thing that's most surprised me holding space for womb work is how much the womb responds physically to energy work, to intention and energy work that we do with her. I mean, that's the thing that blows me away. So when, clients and students come back and say their menses have resumed, or, their wombs are responding physically to the work. I've had a lot of teaching experiences where women are putting light into their womb with a particular intention, and the womb is just, pulsing and dancing inside them, and they can feel that physically. It's absolutely amazing. Wow. And it's absolutely amazing. There is such a visceral cellular response in the womb when we really put our clear intention and light into the womb and offer that to her for healing. She has been so thirsty for that. I believe our wombs have been so thirsty for light and attention and healing, and just for us to be aware of this part of our body that we've been cut off from for such a long time. Our wombs really do dance and sing when we bring light into them.
Yes, indeed. And is dancing and singing part of your process, like actually singing? I heard you say a womb song earlier, and that's been something that comes up for me in my process too. And then womb dance, of dancing from the womb, or with the womb, actually with the whole body in movement. Could you share about those aspects of the healing process?
Absolutely. So a part of my shamanic process has been for a long time to just sing spontaneously with the drum, and blindfolded as well, with the blindfold on. And so one of the practices that I share with women is we blindfold ourselves to really go into the darkness of the womb. And, we might sit in a group with some drumming, and then each woman is bringing forth the sound of her womb. And so we're all just, it's not a structured song. It's really just each woman allowing her womb to sing, whether that's her womb's grief, the joy, the power, the passion, whatever's coming through. And when you have a group of women doing that in a sacred space, it's absolutely magical. And it's so profound. And it's part of what I call, starting to listen to the womb, starting to listen to our womb story is when we unlock her voice and we allow her to speak and sing through us. And it's very much the same with movement. Our wombs want to dance. And again, they don't want to be given a structure and a set of rules on how that's meant to look. Our wombs want that fierce spontaneity. And so I'm very much an advocate, very, very important for me as part of womb work, that we move our bodies and that we breathe into our bodies and that we allow a full physical expression of our bodies and that we liberate the hips and the pelvis. It's so important. Because, particularly for Western women, our hips and our pelvises are generally very locked up. We're used to sitting on chairs all day. We don't move this part of our bodies, and our wombs love to make circles. They love to dance in circles, and they need to, because we need that vital circulation in our bodies. My womb is always telling me, move more, I need you to move. I need the blood to flow. I can't complete my healing until you let the blood flow through me, till you move me.
Beautiful.
So I very much believe in womb dancing and womb singing and all those very physical expressions. They're very valuable.
And the connection between the womb and the voice too.
Exactly.
I mean, I always say we have two cervixes, right? This is the cervical spine,
right?
And then the womb cervix, the neck of the womb and the neck of the body, and then if you look at a photo of the vocal cords, it looks very much like a vaginal opening. And so we have this very clear connection between our upper mouth and our lower mouth, and our upper voice and our lower voice that needs this voice that can actually make a sound to express herself. So lovely. It's fascinating to hear your story and to see that there's a sort of a collective womb intelligence that's guiding us all. I mean, when I began my womb healing journey, well, not when I began, but when I started to feel the call to make it the central focus of my work, I kept getting this term, womb awakening. And I didn't know anyone who had ever said anything like that to me. And I started doing searches, and I found the Fountain of Life Womb Awakening, and actually was fascinated with their work and did some apprenticing with them. And then to hear that you also received this idea or this term of womb awakening all on your own, independent of the Fountain of Life folks, and have been developing this whole body of work, because I felt like I was developing my own body of work too, but I wanted to see what someone else saying womb awakening was doing, right? I'm curious, what is this about? And so it seems like we're, and they wrote the book, but they're like, we don't own womb awakening. It's just something that's happening, and so we're just writing a book about it, right? And so it's very validating. It feels like it's coming from a collective awareness and the collective womb, if you will, that's saying, okay, we're awakening our wombs now, and you're chosen as a womb awakening facilitator, and you're chosen, and here you go through this process and then begin to share it with others. And so that's a big part of the vision and mission of the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, is to facilitate us connecting and saying, wow, you had this experience, and this is how and look at how similar it is. And I mean, I had never talked to you before, and yet you're describing processes. We didn't go to the same trainings somewhere to learn all of this. We just, from our womb wisdom, are saying, oh, these processes are important. This is what a womb song, womb dance, these are important parts of it. Trauma recovery, important parts of it, all of it. And so I'm just so grateful for you coming and sharing your process with me. It's very inspiring. You can tell I'm talking a lot and getting excited.
That's what we're here for, to get excited together. That's what we're here for, to get excited together and to
Exactly.
and to encourage each other. And I think it's wonderful what you say. It's true. I believe that for some reason, you know, this deep collective memory is bubbling up for so many women. And then each of us has a different role to play inside that. But as you say, the practices and the foundations of that work, they really seem to be the same to me for anyone I talk to.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah, and then when I have women coming to train with me, I feel as if they already know this too. You know, it doesn't feel like they're learning anything new. Like there's just a holding of space while they remember it, and that's it. And it's just so natural.
Right.
It's just so natural to do this.
Right. And you're there to support it to happen for them, and to reassure in the moments of doubt or concern, to reassure and that's what I feel like our temple space is for as well. It's beautiful. Well, I feel I could visit with you and share about this wonderful process. It's so good to be able to talk with people who are, with fellow womb-centered healing practitioners. Even though it's happening, it feels like organically all over the world that women are realizing the importance and centrality of the womb space. And everyone, people of all genders, are recognizing that. It can still feel a little bit isolated and alone, because in my particular local area, after being here for 5 years, I'm only just now starting to have a community of local people that are, that can connect with it and that I can talk with it about. And but then they all often want to talk about other things too, and I just want to talk about this. This is it, And so it's so great to talk with somebody who's also made it the central focus of your life and your work. So I really appreciate you coming on here with us, Dianna. So is there a way that people can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your work?
For sure. My website, which is www.sacredwomanawakening.com.
sacredwomanawakening.com. Lovely. So, and I know that you have a newsletter and a gift when people sign up, all about self-love. Is that right?
That's right. I've done a lot of coaching and groups, so women's groups, and what I realized was that if we want to heal, actually, whatever we're healing, and the very specific womb healing process aside, we have to bring self-love into our lives if we want to heal. We have to love all of those shadows, the guilt, the shame, the darkness, the fear, the self-rejection, the physical self-rejection, all of it. Mm-hmm. We have to bring love into it. It's the only way. And so I created a little video series which is all about just bringing the energy of love into all these different aspects of your life as really the fundamental way to transform.
Beautiful.
Because I really did. I lived through a lot of shame and self-loathing and guilt, and I think a lot of sexual abuse survivors have had the same journey. And this was my key, and it still is my key. I'm not done yet. Mm-hmm. I'm still working to bring more and more love into my body and my emotion.
Beautiful. Do you go back and listen to your own video series sometimes to find you? I do too. When I'm existing.
We teach what we need, right?
Exactly. All right.
Everything I teach, I really need it still.
Yeah, me too.
I haven't mastered any of it. I'm still the student. I'm teaching it, but I'm still the student.
Right.
With everything.
Right. Having it come through you is the way for you to receive it.
Yeah, but then to actually really fully integrate it and really hold it, I'm with the womb work as well. I'm very much still on that journey of integration. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's a long road.
Mm-hmm. Yes, could be generations long.
Exactly. We're just beginning.
All right. Well, thank you once again, Dianna. And for listeners, if you want to learn more about the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, you can go to wombcenteredhealing.com. And you can also join in the conversation. I have a Facebook group called the Womb-Centered Healing Temple. And I also have an alternative to Facebook. Many people in the in the Facebook group and in Facebook in general, my community often complain about privacy issues, censorship. I know several womb-centered healing practitioners and artists who've been severely censored by Facebook for talking about menstruation, sexuality, for doing artwork with nudity, with a feminine form or human form, nude human form. And so it inspired me to find an alternative. So I also have a group on Mighty Networks where you can join free of a lot of the stuff, the advertising and the business orientation of, and the censorship of Facebook and the privacy concerns of Facebook. So if you're not even on Facebook because of those reasons, you can join us in the Mighty Networks, in the Mighty Network, and it's the Womb-Centered Healing Temple there. And I'll be sharing this podcast there and on YouTube and on Anchor. So you can find us in all of those places and reach out if you have some insights or inspirations from this conversation. We'd love to hear from you. All right, until next time, that's all for now.